Thank you very much for being the most amazing and the most engaged and involved audience. I would like to mention once again that if you want to access the program schedule electronically, there is a QR code on the printed schedule, because as changes happen in the schedule, the latest and the most updated schedule is available online. Do keep tweeting, do keep talking about the Future Summit, do keep using our hashtags, hashtag the Future Summit, hashtag the big picture. Also, we're using hashtag HBL, hashtag Unity Foods Limited. So, we're starting the after lunch sessions on day 1 of the 7th edition of the Future Summit, co-hosted by Group and HBL, powered by Unity Foods Limited, in strategic partnership with OICCI and Corporate Pakistan Group. Right, so we're now going to start the 3rd session on sustainability, climate change and decarbonization. In the words of Antonio Guterres, Secretary General UN, to all those working, machining and championing real climate change, I want you to know that you're on the right side of history. In present times, there's hardly a global issue more critical in the world as more critical than climate change. So all of us, as in everybody who's alive right now, are the first to see the early warning signs of climate change and are the last to be able to do something about it. A few years ago, a senior mentor of mine jokingly said, "There is no planet B." So that has really stuck with me. For developing countries, the risks and hazards of climate change, as you all know, are even higher. South Asia has become more and more disaster prone in the last few decades. Specifically, Pakistan has some of the highest disaster risk levels in the world. So it's obvious that this is one of the most important sessions in this conference. So we'll start with an address by one of our international speakers. We're very happy to welcome on the stage Bruno Olierhoek, founder and CEO Ubuntu Advisory and Consultancy. He has worked across multiple countries, continents and cultures. He is the CEO of a management and business advisory firm. He believes in business as a force for good. And to elaborate on this concept, I'd like to invite Bruno to please take the stage. I need to see that you're well fed. Okay, Bruno, all yours. You have. Okay.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for inviting me, Aswar, the Nutshell team, and all delegates for being here. Let me start with a quote that I find very interesting, which is, "At present, we are stealing the future, selling it in the present, and calling it gross domestic product." It's a quote by Paul Hawken. He's an author, entrepreneur, environmentalist. And I think that we need a change. I was actually in Pakistan living with my family from 2015 to 2018 as I was running Nestlé for Pakistan and Afghanistan. At that time, I was one of the projects we had was introducing microcredit to 100,000 dairy farmers with Telenor, with Michael, who's actually also in the room. And I had also the honor of being the president of OICCI in 2018. So I'm going to be talking about how do we do business in a way that creates a win-win-win for the organization, for the communities, as well as for the planet. So my background is actually multicultural. This is a picture of my parents my wife and myself. You can see we're dressed in the Dutch traditional clothes, but my mother is actually French and my wife is Indonesian. I studied in France and then built my career across different countries, moving from Indonesia to Vietnam, to the Philippines, to Switzerland, to Central Africa. Then I came here to Pakistan, South Africa, and I'm now based in the UAE. So my thoughts and experience are a combination of Dutch ingenuity combined with the wisdom from the developing world. So the theme for the conference is to take a step back, rise above, look beyond the big picture. So I think in terms of what is wrong with the way we do business today, we have to go back to this very famous quote from Henry Ford, where he said any customer can have any color he wants for his car as long as it's black. So of course Henry Ford set up the assembly line that was highly focused and highly efficient. And don't get me wrong, of course, this way of doing business led to a lot of prosperity in the world, but is also partially to blame in us being stuck now and knowing how to move from here. But I have a proposal to make to all of you. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah. Oh. Yeah, so Dana already talked about that it's actually not all bad and what progress mankind has been making over the last so many decades. And indeed, if you haven't read the book yet, I highly recommend that you read Factfulness by Hans Rosling, because he cuts through all the negative attention in the media, and he gives the facts and his 10 reasons that demonstrate that our world actually has been improving, uplifting a lot of people out of poverty on the healthcare side, etc. But that is not to say that all is good and well. And I think our way of operating has now moved to a point that we see the limitations. And if we don't change quickly, what we saw in Pakistan last year with a huge flood affecting more than 30 million people is unfortunately something that will happen time and time again across the world. And it's not only in Pakistan that people are unhappy. People are demonstrating all over the world, and they do see capitalism as one of the issues. But what is the alternative? And I think that if we look at our problems, the world needs a massive wake-up call. We're sitting on a sitting time bomb, and in fact, we call it a polycrisis, as we're facing so many issues, not only the global warming, but also water depletion, soil depletion, geopolitical issues, all the inequalities. So we need to do something, and again, I think that there is hope. The question is, if we all realize that we have issues, what are we going to do about it? And in this book, The 4,000 Weeks, basically talks about that we all have more or less 4,000 weeks on the planet. And the question is, how do you want to use your time? What's the legacy you want to build? How do you want to move forward? And I believe that as leaders, we cannot control the conversations, but at least we can and we should influence the conversations and do it through our actions. If we look at leaders and where the leadership should come from, unfortunately, we very often have leaders, both in business as well as in politics, that have questionable moral compasses. And I feel also that there's too much of focus and almost obsession with only generating profits and looking at the world as a win-lose situation. And I think it's time that we start to look at ways where we can create win-win-win situations. So the world is sometimes fed up with politics and looking at business and the leadership of business. And some business leaders are stepping up. We've got Paul Polman, the ex-CEO of Unilever, that has written this fantastic book, Net Positive, where he explains that with the right mindset, companies can give back more than they take. And he is calling for courageous leadership and courageous companies. I obviously fully agree with him. And I believe that business needs to practice conscious leadership. So in 2021, I was honored with my team of winning the Conscious Companies Awards in Africa. And on the panel of the Conscious Companies is Professor Mervyn King, who has done a lot of work globally in writing about governance, oversight, and integral reporting that we are now using as the standard in the world. And having won this Conscious Companies Award, it made me really think deeper about what is conscious companies and how come that conscious companies sounds like such a soft skill, such an abstract thing. Whereas actually, if you think about it, it is, and I will talk to you about how, it is something that can have and deliver hard results. So it's not something fluffy at all, but something that we need to think about concretely. And to aspire my holistic impact ambitions, I've decided to leave my corporate role in Nestlé and to set up my own company, Ubuntu, where I want to help companies on their journey towards more sustainability and promote this conscious leadership in the world. So sometimes people think of companies as being evil and the multinationals doing so much bad in the world. Is that really so? If we actually go back to the first companies, they were actually created in my home country of the Netherlands when the different businessmen put their money together to finance their big expeditions to trade with Mughal India at that time. And the VOC was the first company. But all the companies that followed since then trade to the government how they were able to add value through their services and products to society. And if they weren't able to demonstrate that, they wouldn't get their trade license. So in other words, companies were actually conscious by design. But the limited company, while in the eyes of the law is a person, of course is incapacitated and innate by itself. And it's the leaders, it's us in those companies that are its consciousness. So our actions do matter. Another thing that influenced me in terms of thinking about how to have this conscious leadership approach is coming from my hometown of Rotterdam back in Holland, where the football club Feyenoord has this song, Geen woorden maar daden. Not words, but deeds. So it's about what you're doing, and everybody needs to be intrinsically motivated and take personal action. But then also having moved around the world, I came across, now in the West, we tend to be very individualistic, and in the developing world, it's more about the collectivism. And the spirit of Ubuntu, I am because we are, is beautiful. And I just want to illustrate it with this little story. The story goes that there was this anthropologist from the West that came to Africa to study the tribes. And he did a little experiment with the children. He got the children of the village together, and under the tree he put a basket full of ripe fruits. And he told the children, I'm going to count down from 10, and then the first one that gets to the fruits can have the whole basket for himself. So he did the countdown, and then what happened was really amazing, because the children were actually grabbing each other's hands and walking to the fruits together, so they could sit around and eat the fruits together. And that is the spirit of Ubuntu. And I think the key lesson there is, again, if we all work together, we will be able to enjoy the fruits of our labor together as well. The last part where we'll talk about my influence is that I grew up in a part of the Netherlands that is below sea level, and they call that a polder. So the polder is reclaimed land and obviously protected by the dikes that keep the ocean at bay. And this was actually already being constructed in the 14th, 15th century in the Netherlands. And at that time, to keep the polder safe, everybody had to work together. Whether you're rich, poor, black, white, whatever religion, didn't matter, because you had the common enemy and you had to work together to protect the polder. And that approach has stuck in the Netherlands. And also in the way they do their government, it's run in a seeking consensus approach, where the government always works together with the private sector, as well as labor, by the way, on a wide variety of subjects. And this working together, this consensus building is called the polder model. And it's done very well for them. And in fact, isn't it amazing how such a small, tiny country with very little sun, very little land, very few people, is actually the second largest exporter of agricultural products in the world. So clearly something that they're doing there is working. And I think that the key lesson is really we need to expand the field, create an ecosystem, and work together in that ecosystem. So in the context of a company, of course, if I take Nestlé, for example, it's more than just sourcing, manufacturing, and distribution. You have to look at the whole ecosystem with all the partners and all the stakeholders, and then try actively to find where are the common resources, where are the links, and where can we work together? So that we move away from a model where the inputs lead to waste at the end of the day, to a model where you use that waste as an input for other value creation value streams. And the key here is that where we often get it wrong, we say the concept of circularity is nice, but we forget that it's not necessarily your core strength that need to be used. And just look at nature to get inspiration. Because in nature, when the leaf falls from the tree, it doesn't become a new leaf, but it gets compost, and then the worms eat it, and the chicken eat the worms, and the fertile ground feeds the tree again. So the way of thinking about circularity is different from the Henry Ford single line approach, and that is what we need to realize. So on circularity, the father of circularity, Professor Gunther Pauli, with The Blue Economy, another book that I highly recommend that you read. To make it not about the theory, but show you some concrete examples, let me show you some examples of the last 5 years that I worked on myself. The first one is the model called REAL, Realizing Enabled and Empowered African Livelihoods, where we worked with the Makoba tribe. They were dispossessed from their lands in the apartheid days, and then when they got their lands back, there was actually nothing there, and they had to build up their whole community from scratch. So we worked with them to set up a dairy farm, but then we worked together on also finding new ways and think more creatively. So they had a lot of black wattle, which is an alien species that sucks up a lot of water. And they always had to cut it down and get rid of it. And we actually did some research, and we said this can be converted into fodder for the cows. And by the way, when we did that, we saw the emissions of the cows also were reduced. They were farting less. We used the dung of the cows also to recuperate energy from it. We replaced the fertilizers that were artificial with chicken dung and many other initiatives. And as a result, these farms now are net zero, and at the same time with a higher productivity of dairy per cow. The next example is, so that was upstream, the next example is in our factories, where in one of the factories we worked with a company called Eco to take the exhaust and convert it from the boiler house exhaust, we converted it into food-grade baking powder, which then we could use in the biscuit making for our Kit Kat confectionery. So full circularity, and the waste becomes all of a sudden a value stream. The next example is actually, here you can see the ladies from the Future of Hope. What we did was, we make Nescafé, and in the process of making the coffee, you've got a lot of spent coffee ground. And in the past, we would just burn the coffee ground to get a little bit of energy from it. But we said, fundamentally, there's a lot of nutrition still left in those spent coffee grounds. And we then worked with this foundation to grow oyster mushrooms that have over 50% protein, so highly nutritious food. And so those ladies were from the community that we trained up, previously unemployed. They could sell part of the harvest for their income, and part of it we dehydrate and reintegrate it back in our Maggi products. So again, circularity and new value streams generated from this waste. And by the way, after the mushrooms have done their work with the spent coffee ground, you can actually use it as feed for the chickens, and the chickens lay eggs, so yet another value stream that can come from it. Oh, and the last example I want to share, also downstream, is in Zimbabwe, where we also got the ladies to work, create value by their income, by distributing the products in their neighborhoods. A project actually very similar to what Nestlé has been doing here with BISP, also in Pakistan. So in other words, my message today was about more sustainability in the way you do business should not be seen as a cost or a sacrifice, but should be seen as an opportunity for a real win-win-win for the company, for the organization, as well as for the planet. So we are at the crossroads of opportunity and responsibility. The Ubuntu model shows that there is a way to redefine success, to not have a solitary approach to making profits, but a collaborative journey towards a joint and shared prosperity, so that we shift our focus from finite gains to infinite impact. Thank you very much, and let us work together to build a future where business is not just a force for good, but a force for greatness. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bruno. So sustainability is an opportunity, according to Bruno, and in the words of a wise man, sustainability takes forever, and that's exactly the point. So with this, we come to our next dialogue, which is going to discuss how decarbonization makes a great business case, how organizations are building sustainability into their overall strategies, and whether they're actually adequately equipped to implement mitigation and adaptation strategies. This and many other relevant areas will be discussed now by our panelists, whom I'm going to invite on the stage. Naz Khan, first of all, please join us on the stage, Principal Country Officer, International Finance Corporation, Pakistan. Syed Munis Abdullah Alvi, CEO, K Electric. Asif Chuma Sab, CEO, Lucky Core Industries. Umar Ehsan Khan, CEO, Tollens. Amir Shehzad, Director, Unity Foods Limited. Talha Khan, Executive Director, Pakistan Environment Trust. We can keep the clapping going. We can do better, we can do better. And our very favorite, one of our favorite moderators, Sajid Aslam. I always, whenever I take your name, Sajid Bhai, Global Head of Public Sector ACCA, but he's moved on to bigger things. He's now partner Spectre Co. LLC, USA. So the panel is in your able hands, Sajid.
Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. And Rabia ne jo kaha tha, I think we are not very well fed. Are we? Any response? Thank you. Just I might have to reintroduce myself. Most of the people here know me more from my ACCA side. Since the inception of the Future Summit, as a ACCA, I normally represented ACCA in this forum, and this month, practically, I moved on from ACCA, and we had some investments in sustainability business, which was more on a technology, data, regulatory side of it. And that's basically now growing very fast. And I have to leave ACCA and start focusing on this side where it was a passive investment, but now it's becoming quite a large one, headquartered in US, European office in Portugal. And right now, a big project we are doing is conservation of islands in US side. So that's quite interesting areas, quite interesting experiences. And in the last few years, I got a chance to really interact with a lot of governments and the businesses within Asia Pacific, where I was working over almost with the 50 different countries. And something which we have learned over the period, that how everybody is on the journey, but at a different level and a different awareness. And collectively, when we look at the countries who have made a progress, that was definitely one thing which Tala keep talking about, is the collaboration. So that's one area which is a very, very important one, where the people have understood that as a problem and opportunity at the both end. So I just start with that. There's a concept of duty of care, and historically, when we are working in any company, as an employee, we have a duty of care. We have a duty of care towards our partner, to our kids. Similarly, we had one duty of care which we unfortunately haven't discharged very well. That was towards the planet and the nature. Over the period, in the last 100, 150 years, we kept producing the product without having a proper accounting. We never accounted for the cost of the nature which we were consuming, or the natural resources which we were consuming. And what happened, that we had a very good lucrative businesses and the product pricing for globally, and at the same time, this particular cost started accumulating over the period. And now we have reached to the level where this debt is payable. And this debt is not the debt which we can restructure, we can redefine or default on that. That's an existence challenge. And that's where it brings us to this discussion, that how we are tackling with the decarbonization, because that's one of a very fundamental area. And there's a good representation from a finance side, from an advocacy side, from a business side, and above all from an energy side, which is the largest source of the emission, and we will try to explore that. At the meantime, we will have 10 to 15 minutes for the audience questions as well. And I'll suggest that if you can prepare your question, keep it precise, introduce yourself, and highlight that who you want to address that question to. So we will start the panel, but we will come back to the audience as well with a certain question. So I'll start, Jamasa, with you. While we are talking about decarbonization and how your company is looking at the business case, where the return will come in terms of all the investment, effort, and the time you are going to spend, and how your investors are looking at that side of it?
Thank you, Sajid. Assalamu alaikum, and first of all, thank you very much, Nutshell Forum, for actually putting together this dialogue. It's a very important dialogue, and it's a dialogue that's actually been on the table for decades. And when I say decades, it actually has been decades. If you go back to 1987, which is when the Montreal Protocol was signed, and the Montreal Protocol was actually about about climate change then, at that point. It was focused more around the depleting ozone layer. It was the phasing out of CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons. So, everyone who used air freshener or spray deodorant, etc., it all had CFCs. Air conditioners, right? So all air conditioners, the cooling gas was a CFC. And there was this imperative then. And this imperative was, if we don't do something about this, there is this hole that is developing in the ozone layer, which is going to lead to global warming, which in turn is going to lead to climate change. 1987, fast forward 2023. And we're actually still talking about it. And not only are we talking about it, but we're actually seeing the impact of climate change. I'm not going to talk about the floods in Pakistan and give you the statistics because, we talk about it ad nauseum, the statistics we repeat continuously. But we have to keep reminding ourselves that there was a calamity that happened. And if we don't actually do something about this, the situation is only going to get worse, not better. So it's no longer the time of inaction, it has to be the time of action. How are companies dealing with this? Companies don't actually have an alternative. Companies don't have an alternative because it's not just a business case any longer, that, if I invest in decarbonization, it's good for the planet, it's good for the environment, but what does it do for my business? What is the most important asset or the most critical asset of any business today? Whether it's a knowledge-based business, whether it's a manufacturing business, whether it's a service business, right? It is human resource. And today, with the human resource that we are trying, and if we want to attract the best human resource, unless you have an employee value proposition that very clearly has an agenda in the area of environment, sustainability, governance, you are not going to get them. It's actually about having, what impact are you having? How are you actually going to make a difference? So it's now no longer a business case.
But employee attraction and talent
EVP, I'm telling you, it's like I said, it's a necessity. It's a necessity.
So Umar Saab, coming to your side, like he already picked up on the refrigeration gas and everything, how it's really working.
Mike.
Sorry. So Umar Saab, from your side, you are already in a business which is at one point of time was questioned around the refrigeration gas and the use of the cheaper gas versus the expensive gas and making it more viable for the business. So how you are creating your business case within your organization in terms of sustainability and making that investment? What's driving it? Is it compliance or, like Jumail Saab mentioned, it's a talent side of it? So what's your business case there?
For having me on this panel. Like Asif said, first of all, I'll sort of agree with Asif. I think this is no more an issue of a business case or not. It's an existential crisis, and every organization needs to now look at it with that lens. And if we don't, then we'll keep looking for reasons why we need to focus on sustainability. So the Montreal Protocol that Asif spoke about used to talk about the ozone layer, but now we all know that the ozone layer is already healing itself, because when the world collaborated, gases came out, refrigerants came out, which have actually helped us do that. So in our case, for example, in Pakistan, 5-6 years ago, voluntarily we made a switch to a refrigerant gas on all our refrigerators. And the gas we use now actually has almost very, very close to a zero impact on the global warming. Now, where's the business case in that? The business case is that while we did that and we optimized our products, even the energy usage of the product came down by 50%, right? So there is a business case, because now more and more people can afford the product. The energy is coming down while it's also helping manage the ozone layer. So the business case really is on two sides. One is on the organization side, where whenever we work on any sustainability projects, there is definitely some operational efficiencies that come in, right? Which significantly impacts our bottom line. But then there is also on the consumer side, where the consumer starts benefiting. So whether it's the lesser use of energy, whether it's low consumption of water in the washing machines. So all these products, when we work on sustainability, they actually create a very beautiful business case for the consumer, while also helping the company. So in terms of, for example, use of recycled products, right? So in our organization, currently almost 22% of all the plastic that we use is recycled plastic. Now, obviously, that means we're only having to buy 78% of virgin plastic, which obviously then again creates a beautiful business case for us. So I'm convinced, first of all, that there is no need to look for a business case. But while I say that, when we actually start getting into it, it's very easy to find one as well.
No, thank you. I think that's important because this is one of the biggest questions we are hearing from US and Europe and APAC, where they are trying to use the regulation to force people to change. And there are business cases, and Bruno also highlighted the recycling and reducing the waste itself is an operational efficiency. Amir, coming to your side, you are also from a business. So when you are looking at the sustainability strategy for your organization, so how you are picking up on a business case? What is the visible thing which you have learned over the period that this is how the return or return on the investment is coming out? On kar lijiye, guys.
Hello?
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you, Sajid, for giving this opportunity. I'll just give you a little bit of a background on Unity Foods. We initiated our consolidated operations end of 2017, and beginning of 2018. When we entered this space, we realized that this segment of, or this specific sector, which was staples, and all related sectors to staples, was a very fragmented industry. And when an industry is very fragmented, it's very difficult to explain the sustainability concept and the decarbonization kind of concept. So in the very first year of operations, we realized that we are very quickly gaining the market share. And that brings a lot of responsibility on us also, because we were very conscious of the fact that the reason why we're getting into this is on a longer term basis. That's when we, the management and the board, got together, the senior management, and we looked at our vision statement. At that time, the company's vision statement was very basic. But because of the fact that we're looking at a longer term business where we can definitely will have an impact on the environment, we wanted to introduce the concept of sustainability. And the best way of doing that was to involve not just the top management or the board, but involve all of the management right down to the PM who would bring you your tea, that what do we mean when we talk about sustainability. So we ran an informal exercise at that time, where we gotten all the employees together and we said, okay, we need a new vision statement. What do we do? And we got all the concepts in from everybody. So everybody got involved in developing that vision statement. And that vision statement that we finalized said that we want to be reliable and sustainable supplier to nation's food security by developing and implementing farm to fork supply chain. So now this is a very, very deep statement. It puts on a lot of responsibility on us as management, as board, to make sure that we remain true to our vision. So that's how it started. And where does our return come in? You see, we've been building a brand for the last 3 years, Sunridge, that you see on your table. We want to be at the point where there would be a QR code on a product. Once you scan that, that'll give you a traceability of the ingredients that went into that product. So that, and because of that, as a company, we would get your long-term consumers who would stay with you because your loyal customers. And that's where our return is. Having those loyal customers, them understanding what the product is, where the ingredients are coming in from, and that's where we keep gaining market. But that is the money for us, right? If we go on for. But what we contribute to the general society is that once we get on that track, we expect our competitors to get on that track too. So once they get on the track, so it's a wide social impact that you can create. So that's where the return is for us.
No, definitely. So I think where we have seen the business case is the talent, attraction, and retention. We have seen the business case of operational efficiency and making it better for the consumer side, like in Dolan's case. And in your case, it's a market share, brand, and reputation, and using a technology for the institutional customer specifically who can have that kind of traceability, which is important for agriculture. And Tala, that's bringing me to your side. you are working on a net zero Pakistan right now, and you have got a certain organization who have already committed to a net zero. So what you are seeing there, how they are progressing on their journey, and what are the key hurdles they are facing or reporting back?
Does that work? Yes.
Yep.
Thanks, Ajit. Let me just quickly introduce our work a bit to the audience as well. Because we're not, as a mainstream brand like my fellow panelists, I mean, I hope we had Pakistan Environment Trust inverters and paints, but we don't. So as an organization, we are primarily focused on mobilizing climate finance for Pakistan through large-scale programs on the implementation side of things. And there are two areas that we work on. We work on developing projects within the carbon market space, and we work on industrial decarbonization, in which Net Zero Pakistan is a coalition that we're working on. It's the coalition of around 26 companies. Amr Saab's company is one of the latest inductees in our coalition, but most of the other members are textile companies in Pakistan. And we've been working with them for the past 2 years on all challenges relevant to decarbonization. So that's the context about the coalition, and as Sajid posed the question, right? And Sajid, as I try to address that question, let me just frame the context, and I promise I'll answer the question you asked. I mean, if I build on the discussion we've been listening today, right, it was focused on export, it was focused on innovation, it was focused on the fact that our economy is shrinking, so we have to open new markets, all of that context. In that context, when you look at our country and where we're sitting right now, and I'll talk about textile, for example, if you look at the textile numbers that we have right now, it's around 60-70% of our exports. It covers 60 to 70% of our national exports. And the size of our exports in around a year ago or 2 years ago was around $20 billion. So $20 billion, around 70% of our national exports is textile. Compare that to Bangladesh, for example, in which textile is around 80% of their exports. The size of their export was around $42 to $43 billion. So the delta is huge, right? So if we're talking about export, if we're talking about innovation, it's all great. But if you look at the context in which we're sitting in a context in which when an investor is trying to invest in a market, they're comparing our business case to business cases in our neighboring countries. If they're trying to source from us, they're looking at the other source destinations as well. Now, there are two options that our companies have at this point. Either they can do fundamental innovation, and we end up creating the next generation of iPhones in Pakistan and then kill the iPhone market, or we end up driving scale, through which we can compete on cost and quality. And that's the lever that we need to play with, essentially speaking, at this point. And that's where the coalition concept comes into play, right? So, I mean, in this coalition, for example, when we talk about these textile companies, and I was working with them on these emission measurement, there are three things that really are the lessons learned, as Sajid was asking in this context, right? One is that in our traditional structures that we have in Pakistan right now, through which we collaborate through our Chamber of Commerces and our different trade bodies and all of these, and they're great. I mean, they're doing amazing stuff. In a coalition format, the structure that changes is that a coalition is focused on one laser-focused objective. And they're trying to drive for that objective. So in our context, for example, net zero or decarbonizing is the objective that all of our members, including Unity Foods, is laserly focused on, which basically enables companies to come together quite effectively and share knowledge quite openly, because now they're not competing in that space. I mean, if you look at textile sector, they're fierce competitors in the market. They don't even visit each other's factories. You literally have to get like a visa to enter from one factory to another factory. Over the course of the past 2 years, under this coalition, we've been able to bring these companies together 12 times in 12 different facilities where they openly shared their knowledge and understanding about this topic. So that kind of structure is important in this context, right? In terms of the progress that the companies have made. I think the second thing that is important is that structure needs to have the agility and the talent behind it to generate that value. So if you really want to get these companies to move towards decarbonization as a goal, at scale fashion, not individual companies, but across the sector, you need to put in your money into the talent that helps proactively solve these problems that come up. Because coalition is not going to focus on generating profit for the company, right? And they're not selling the same product day in and day out. They're actually focused on addressing the problems that the sector or the members are facing and proactively addressing them. Again, giving you a live example, I mean, all of us sitting on the panel know that energy is the biggest source of emission for our factories. In Pakistan, if you want to reduce your energy emissions, the only solution you have is rooftop solar. But it doesn't matter how much rooftop solar you install, it would never cover even half of the energy emissions that you have in any company, right? So you end up relying on your grid, which is not renewable, it's not green. So the only solution that you have in Pakistan that you can apply is getting renewable energy certificates. And in this context, when we were working on this coalition and we're trying to figure out these problems and energy came up as a topic, one of the things that we ended up doing is getting that authority to issue those certificates within Pakistan so that we can start proactively addressing that problem. And that's the kind of work that we need to do in all different structures, where the problems that are coming up, let's try to find solutions and implement those solutions rather than banging on the same, like we've been banging on the power wheeling policy door for the past 10 years, right? And nothing has happened on that front. So we can't, I mean, as a business, we can't just keep banging on the same door, hoping for a different result if we're trying to compete in a market with our neighboring countries, right? Yep. So we need to find practical solutions to problems that get us move the ball to the next level and then build on that.
Thank you, Talat. Thank you. Thank you. We will continue on that, particularly the financial instrument side of it. Talha has already touched upon the energy side and the scope 2 in emission, which is going to be reported particularly in US starting 2024, mid-2024. And energy is one of a key element which is going to really evaluate it there, that what we are doing. So if we are looking at KE, so how you are evaluating that risk in terms of what the changes you need to make? And number two, how you are going to provide that information if somebody want to report their scope 2 emission going forward for their export, whether it's a product or service, if these are the things which are coming out with the EU regulation or US regulation. So how you are looking forward to those two things?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Sajil, thank you very much for inviting us to this fantastic arena where, everyone from predominantly all Pakistan important business houses or opinion makers are here, and they'll be able to explain our position. So as highlighted by my colleague in terms of energy probably is the biggest contributor to the impact on the climate, and I agree that obviously solar is something which probably will help us, but at the outset I want to again highlight this fact that while Pakistan again is impacted by the climate change a lot, and I agree that the floods and everything, we have talked about it a lot, but we have seen it happening. At the same time, the contribution to, damage the climate or the ozone layer is very little as far as we are concerned. If you compare Pakistan with India or China, probably what they emit in 1 year, we probably will do in 30 years. And I'm sure most of us would know that China even today is putting up coal-based power plants for their internal power requirement, which is again, a ballpark number is that probably their requirement is around 1.3 million megawatts as compared to ours, which is in peak we supplied probably 26,000 megawatts. So it's a, day and night probably is a shorter distance if you can compare this. And again, India also has huge power supply, although much less than China. So we understand the importance of the green and the sustainability part of it, and we have explained this many times that we are in the process of putting up number one renewables. And again, renewables is that obviously they are cheap, and we also have a plan to be net zero, although it will take a lot of time. But what we can do and what we are committed also is to have at least 30% of our generation mix on renewables in the next 7 years. And in fact, inshallah, you will see that almost 500 megawatts will be inshallah in the system in the next 2.5 years. Obviously, it is dependent on some regulatory approvals which are still not released, but we are on it, and inshallah we will ensure that what we are committing 30% in the next 7 years, we should do that. And rightly pointed out that it is probably the biggest area in which we can have an impact. But having said that, even smaller things also have a lot of impact, and as discussed, that it makes a lot of sense, and business sense rather, to have that. And I'm sure you must have seen K-Bill. I hope you have not, because if you have not, it means that you have subscribe to e-billing, which is even better. But even the people who are getting bills, our size the bill was reduced last year, and again I can tell you that the numbers that we calculated, that reduction actually saved almost 8,000 trees and a lot of water. And don't tell anyone, some cost also is saved for us. You know, this is a secret which I don't want to tell you. So that is the business case. And also what it has triggered, I can assure you that a lot of other power utilities in the country and other utilities also, they either have started or are in the process of reducing the size of the bill. What we actually and our endeavor is to ensure that we should not send the bill. Actually, it has to be on email. By the way, today the payments that we receive, almost 60% are processed through e-solutions. We have almost 1 million customers. In fact, now around 1.1 million unique customers who are connecting with K Electric through electronic sources, you know, WhatsApp and all these social media platforms, and the physical interaction on phone calls are very limited. At the same time, because we operate in the entire city, and we have been telling people that almost 40% of Karachi is Kachi Abadi, which is undocumented, and electricity is something which is being consumed by everyone, and the touch points were very limited. So we introduced these Roshni Bajis, which are which are girls from those areas itself, and we trained them, we converted them into electricians. They were talking to women at home while the men were away, and there were at least 600,000 interactions, unique interactions, whereby the safety and again, you know, the stealing, all these things were explained to the ladies in-house, why it is so dangerous. And we have data to demonstrate that the incidents that were happening, and most of those incidents were, you know, God forbid, it can be lethal also, but even if it is not lethal, it can be, you can damage your body. The incidents are reduced in those areas. It's something which is documented, and we are working with FMO and Garanco, and they are very appreciative of these programs. And it is absolutely, and I think it is now very clear to everyone that sustainability is now beyond a fashionable thing. It is something which is a reality, and if you apply these things, definitely it will make a lot of business sense to do that. And we are cognizant of this fact, but because we are coming from the power sector background, I want to allude to the fact that yes, it is very important to have renewables, but let me tell you, you can't run countries on renewables. You need to have base load also, and countries who have moved very fast on renewables, we saw there were problems in certain countries. There were in fact blackouts also in developed economies because of their reliance on renewables. So it's a very tight rope in terms of the decision, how much and to what extent you can have renewables. We are operating in, I would say, a very stressed economy, and the cost of tariff, the power is too high, and people obviously are suffering. We have capacity. We need to do solarization. We need to have base load. So, all these decisions have to be put together in terms of coming up with the right amount of solar that any entity, solar or wind or even water.
So hydro is also now categorized as a green.
Hydro is categorized, and I can tell you that we are working on various initiatives whereby probably inshallah in the next few years. I hope in the near future we should have something supplied to Karachi from Heidel through Wheeling, inshallah.
So I think that's another area, and you are very right. The renewable energy, there is a big debate that how much renewable and how much time and effort it takes to shift, particularly from a transmission line if that's not very close. So energy storage is one of our other area where the technology is being developed. If we can do that, so that might be one of a way. So just a very question, yes and no. We are looking at NDC and it has certain targets for 2030 and 2050 in terms of the green energy and transition of the energy. Do you see that happening by Pakistan achieving 2030 target in terms of their current definition of the green energy side of it?
Do I have a right to remain silent?
Yes. So we got the answer.
Let me tell you that you have seen that they issued an RFP for 600 megawatts. The tariff was set at 3.4 cents to 1 kilowatt hour. Nobody actually, there was no bid received. Now they have issued another RFP, which is not, in fact, a reference to a tariff, but they have put certain things in terms of indexation and how they are going to look at it going forward. So I expect something definitely will happen, and the government is also engaged with the investors from other part of the world to actually bid for that. If one happen and we see a tariff, which obviously, I hope I'm able to explain, but if you get a tariff of 6 cents, for example, it would be a question whether you should do it or you should not do it. Because what is the idea? The idea is to reduce
affordability,
the overall generation cost, or to have renewables. So if you are shutting down a base load plant and you are evacuating some power at maybe 6 cents, it might be cheaper as 6 cents, but the overall cost to the country might be higher. So 30% renewable when we have water, wind and solar all together. We need to see the result from the first tender. If they receive an overwhelming response and good tariff, then probably they can multiply it. Obviously, with already almost 6,000 to 7,000 megawatts on Heidel, there is a good chance. But the future projects will be dependent on the economic conditions a lot.
No, thank you, Bruno. Thank you. I think energy will be one of a subject which will keep coming back, and we do expect some questions coming from the audience as well. Nas, coming to you, 2 questions for you. You are representing IFC, and IFC working globally in different countries, and they are interact with the private and the public sector at the same time from a policy side as well. We are seeing NDC, and the NDC, which Pakistan nationally determined contribution under the UNFC, under the Paris Agreement, what they have submitted to UNFCCC for 2021. It's a great document, and it has got a strategy, the framework, the task, the responsibility, the funding which is required. And we have seen similar document in the other countries. How you see that NDC working out for the private sector, how they become aware of it, so whatever they are doing on a sustainability, that should be aligned with that NDC rather than they are coming up with something else. Number one. Second question, IFC has recently developed a great financial instrument to really support the private sector in terms of their sustainability journey. So if you can elaborate on that as well and introduce those the financial instrument or talk about it. So I think that will be a good reference point for the audience, particularly for the businesses to start working with IFC on that. So NDC and the financial instruments.
Sure. Thank you, Sajid. So I think on the NDC, you're right. It's a good document, and I guess for the benefit of the audience as well, we had committed as Government of Pakistan that we will reduce our GHG emissions by 50% by 2030, and of which 15% are unconditional reduction, and a 35% is conditional reduction based on the fact that you get some kind of financing for that transition. And just to give you some estimates, the transition, just the energy transition, of course there's the agri side, there's the transport side, there are many sides, but it's estimated that just the energy transition will, it's expected to cost us over $100 billion. So 35% of what we've committed is actually conditional. And some of the things that the government has said that they will do under this is that we will move to renewables, that 60% of our energy or our power generation will be through renewables. They've said that by 2030, 30% of the new cars sold will be EVs. Then they have said, obviously, there's a ban on coal, imported coal that they have put. They've talked about land use and, etc. So there are commitments that we have made. But how do we see this actually coming into play? I think the first thing is just communication. And you have this great document, but there really hasn't been much communication to the rest of the country and to the corporate sector. So this needs to come out there, because otherwise you're going to have a government and the corporate sector which is just not aligned at all on this count. And that's not to say that the corporates are not doing work. Corporates, we are seeing, are actually now doing a lot of work, and some of it is themselves realizing, some of it is pull based from, okay, if it's textile and it's applying to Europe, or so, depending on who their customers are, people have started doing this already. So we see a lot of work happening on resource efficiency, and working towards the greening side. I know we are engaged with the government and with other people on green buildings, but there's really so much work to be done. So the first thing is just communicating what it is out there and communicating it loudly and putting down those 2, 3, 4, basic KPIs where you tell everyone that these are the things we need to get to. So everyone knows. And then putting some incentives behind it, right? Having those, green taxonomies, carbon pricing, etc. So we've worked with the central bank, and that's what IFC typically does. Even in other countries, you work with the financial institutions, with the regulators. So we've worked and we've put together the green banking guidelines with the state bank. We've actually also worked with them to do the ESRM, manuals. And we are engaged with SECP and the PSX on ESG as well, right? And once you work with regulators, you help to cascade that down. So all I'm saying is, if from the government you put those 2, 3 key KPIs, everyone knows that this is what we all need to go behind. Because, and we heard this in the morning as well with one of the gentlemen in the opening session, said that there is a market out there that needs to be tapped as well. Other than the fact that you've committed, there's a lot of climate finance that's out there, and you will not be able to access any of that unless you actually start moving very aggressively towards all of this. So yes, so it's a great document, but I think a lot needs to be done to put it out there. So that's one thing. I think the other thing you mentioned about products. So yes, the sort of on this side, I think that the primary products out there are, obviously you have your green bonds, blue bonds, or you have your sustainability linked finance. So either you have like a use of proceeds kind, which is your green bond, blue bond, social bond, where it is linked to the use of proceeds. So it could be climate mitigation, climate adaptation, ocean conservation, etc. So this is one stream. Or you can have your sustainability linked financing, right? Bonds or loans. And over here, this is typically target based, right? Where you're actually given ambitious targets that you have to achieve, and which are not business as usual targets. And so they're performance-based targets, and then your pricing of the loan can be incentivized and linked to that. So if you hit certain targets, your pricing may come down. You hit another target, it comes down. So those are the kind of things that you would do. And your targets, your KPIs could be, if it's sustainability linked, they could be, and you can pick those, in conjunction with your lender, and they could be energy efficiency based, they could be gender based, they could be, there's several targets, that you can do. They could be related to circularity, reduction of waste, more recycling, etc. So those are some of the things that products that are out there. From IFC's perspective, we have actually committed that starting July this year, 85% of our lending will have to be, of new projects will have to be Paris aligned, right? And from 2025, July 1st onwards, it'll have to be 100% aligned. right? So, I mean, this is the kind of commitment we've made. But to be able to do all of this, we all need to start moving together, very collaboratively and aggressively. So I'm glad to see a lot of the work that's being done here, or if net zero, and you're pulling companies together. And we are seeing a lot more of that happening, where people want to sort of work together to get a lot of this done.
No, thank you, Naz. And I think you bring out a very interesting point. Tala also highlighted that initially. We are talking about, there are financial instruments which are available. We also talk about there's a green climate finance available. Pakistan led that loss and damage fund last year as well. Still, how it shape up, we don't know. And there are a lot of other funding which is available, which in morning there was a discussion around it. And there's a market around the carbon credit, which I think they mentioned 100 billion. We know that it's 4.4 trillion by 2030. That's the bet which the other side is taking. The businesses will not be able to do enough, and they need that kind of offset, and Pakistan is very ripe for that. But all those things, including those financial instruments which are linked with a certain performance, that's require reporting. That's required data. That's require a flow of information. That's require a certain level of assurance for the stakeholders who are engaged. So now the people who have already started their journey and their businesses sitting there, including the K Electric, and we will come to you as well, what kind of reporting you expect those businesses bringing out, so people can really take advantage of those financial instruments. I met the Green Climate Fund director once, and they said we are getting a lot of business cases from the governments to draw money against their NDC, but most of the time the way they put the information, it's an infrastructure fund rather than the climate related one. So that's one of a capacity issue and a talent issue which we are seeing there as well. So coming back to you, Asif Sab, like you are already on the journey of sustainability, and there is a financial instruments which are available, which you can access, and there is other funding available. So how your reporting mechanism is working to showcase and assure people, or your board and investor as well, the progress is doing well and it's substantiated with information and data. And specifically that it's not a greenwashing, because that's the biggest risk which any organization in today's world will be running.
As far as reporting is concerned, setting targets, monitoring them, that is really an initiative that has to be led from the top. So you've got to demonstrate that commitment. It has to be top-driven for environmental stewardship and sustainability. At LCI, previously ICI, Pakistan, we've actually been at the forefront of sustainability reporting, and our first sustainability report was published 15 years ago, right? And we have consistently, right, been very, very transparent in communicating our sustainability, our achievements, our targets, our decarbonization initiatives, and then measuring them, and then publishing those results. And really to further sort of reinforce the commitment, and then which touches on the greenwashing bit, is we actually have it audited by a third-party auditor. So our sustainability report is actually an audited sustainability report. We have a sustainability council, which is actually headed by a board member. The council focuses on developing, implementing, and monitoring sustainability KPIs, initiatives, and practices. And within the organization, we also have a program that we run under our foundation, which is called the Pehchan program, which is an employee volunteer program in which we've had about 400 employees, right, actually giving of themselves to community-driven initiatives around sustainability. We've partnered with RLCC, which is the Rana Liaquat Ali Community Center, on taking post-use waste, converting it into some great products. Actually, in fact, we were talking about the bag you were carrying, which is a recycled paper bag, to coasters. I mean, it's fantastic the kind of stuff they've done. So, on sustainability reports, if you have that commitment and you have the transparency, then you also have ACCA, ICAP, that actually do assess, the veracity of these reports and the quality of the reports. And I'm again very, very pleased to share with you that LCI for the last 6 years has actually been winning an award on the quality of its sustainability report. And we use multiple platforms to communicate, both internally and externally. And I think what you also have to do is you have to be able to demonstrate through not just as you said, not just the business case, but on how you're really impacting the environment. And, we talked about, circularity has been talked about. We run a polyester business. And in our polyester business, last year, we have actually recycled 198 million PET bottles. And we've done this to develop a 100% recycled polyester fiber that in terms of properties, touch, feel, and performance is as good as prime polyester fiber. And now we've gone a step further. We've actually introduced traceability into that.
Oh, yes.
Because where the whitewashing was coming, a lot of companies were making claims that a product was 100% recycled. But in effect, it was not. And the only way you could actually demonstrate is that to have the traceability. Oh, yes. So, these are the sort of additional steps that you have to take. So this, broadly speaking, are the various initiatives. And like I said, it has to be driven from within. And the communication, Naz mentioned communication. Yeah. It's very important. We're sitting here and just communicating and an awareness amongst this room of sustainability, of climate change is not enough. We actually, it has to be embedded and it has to
start
really
from the
be
school, college,
literally like,
university.
it has to be like a gremlin that kind of spreads through your entire ecosystem. Because, people will talk about being environmentally responsible, of sustainability, of actually not polluting, right? Either physically or through emissions. But the minute they leave the workplace and they go home, it's a very different. So so the communication bit is very important, which is something that we also
changing the habit. We can see that there is a one-time use plastic which is sitting on this table, which is not a good thing, right?
But then that becomes a raw material for us.
As long as there is a recycling mechanism and
there has to be a circularity. There has to be.
There has to be.
Yeah. The next big thing is actually going to be textile to textile circularity. Exactly. Right now, that hasn't quite happened yet.
Europe has got only 1% conversion of the existing textile which they import to a textile. The rest is go waste.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I think we will take one or two questions from the audience and we will come back. If anybody has capitalized or monetized that sustainability reporting or data so far to convert that into access to new market or access to capital or a cheaper capital like Naz was mentioning, which is tiered pricing in terms of the performance. So any example coming from this side or anything which you are planning to do would be a great idea to come back. But just take one or two questions from there and we will come back. So introduce yourself, your question, and who you want to address that.
Hello. Right, so this is Bilal Javeri, CIO at Lucky Motor Corporation. Just a couple of quick questions. How many of you have considered technology to redouble your sustainability efforts or enhance them in any form? And the second question is, you all come from several different industries representing different businesses. Have any of you considered biodiversity as part of your sustainability program as well?
So thank you, Bilal. Who you want to address this question to? Anyone? So, Amir, you want to go?
Hello. Yes, thank you for the question. With regards to biodiversity, we are already looking into the possibility of, in fact, we're evaluating as we speak, the possibility of getting into biodiesel. It can be looked at from our perspective. Now, we're studying it right now. But it can be looked at as a natural extension of the business that we're doing. We can use after we process the palm oil that we import, then we can use the residue for biodiesel production. And there are other wastage and other materials that are available that can be used for production of biodiesel. So that is something we definitely are looking at. In terms of looking at digitization of the whole process, again, I'll just take one step back, because all of these processes require a lot of capex. And whenever the organization looks at this and accepts that they need to go on the sustainability path, it is important for them to understand and accept the capex part of it also. And that's where the challenge also comes in. As far as the capex is concerned, we have done we have SAP for HANA installed in our facilities, and we are now looking at producing all the reports for our management in terms of review, in terms of calculation of wastage and all of that stuff, so that it comes directly from the system. But again, just taking your question one step forward, one of the challenges that I feel that developing economy today faces when it starts moving on to sustainability and decarbonization is the understanding of the impact that it can have on the return for the shareholder or for the investor, especially for the first few years. You see, for developed economies, those economies are always taken as high risk. And from an investor perspective, you expect a high return when you take on a high risk. But then again, this is something that needs to be instilled, and education is extremely important. That when you're doing this, when you're coming into, even in a developing economy or underdeveloped economy, and there's an effort that is being made, then the support has to be from, and understanding has to be from the stakeholders as well. I mean, today we have multilaterals like IFC and ADB, and they have, it's inbuilt in their whole program. Whenever they look at somebody or some corporate to fund, then they have their ESG compliance and all those things. They come in and they have their teams, they come in and they review our sites. But I think that has to be incorporated for our local financial institutions as well. Because
so mobilizing the private capital, yes, and the patient capital, the most important.
Exactly, that is extremely important for all this.
No, thank you, Amit. Thank you very much. We can take one question and then we will come back to panelists. So, who has a mic?
He's asking a question. Hello. I'm Rizwan from K Electric. Actually, it's very unfortunate to see that nobody is actually from the government sector here. So how do you think that without the involvement, active involvement of the government, we can handle these challenges?
Do you want to address that?
It's to you actually. I mean, you told that we are working with 50 actually government, but actually nobody is here. I mean, from Pakistan.
Yep. So I think if we go back to the government, they have got right now their own challenges to really figure out who's doing what. In this morning, we had the representation from the government, and in fact, we had a representation from the energy sector. Muhammad Ali was there, and he shared the idea, and then the representation from strategic project from SIFC was there, and they also shared the green initiative from their side and even the partnership models this morning as well. So we are continuing that conversation with the private sector right now, how they are going to capitalize on something which they have already shared in the morning. Right. So does it answer your question? Just going back to the data side, and we will come to the questions again if we get some time. We have got 12 minutes in total. Very quickly, Naz, what you will like to see as a data if you have to make a decision for funding, which Amir was asking, I need a patient capital, which is linked with a certain biodiversity target or maybe carbon capture and storage technology side of it. So what KPIs you would like him to commit and provide you that information?
I mean, we do this in conjunction with the clients, but I tell you that we have an ESG team internally, and it's a very strong team. As in they will come in, they will actually sit with the client, and they will go through all of this. And in a way, if things don't go well there, it's a very difficult investment to do. I mean, you cannot get that investment through. So it's a really, really important element now for the kind of funding that we're looking at.
The one thing which you were looking for, the patient capital, so there is a mechanism available. If it's available with IFC, it's available with the other institution as well. It's just that how we engage with them, how we become more knowledgeable or talented to pick up those conversations and start looking for that. Taha, you want to add?
I've got, is this working? Yes.
Yep.
I've got a reflection and I've got a question for all of us as well, right? So my reflection is we're talking about this. We're talking about this in the context where it's happening across the globe. I mean, net zero ambition and decarbonization is a target that many cities have said. I don't know how many economies have said. There are trillions of dollars being quoted, being pumped into that, right? There's standards being defined for each and everything that we're talking about here. So we don't really need to reinvent the wheel, right? We just need to plug ourselves into those global standards and try to make sure that we really need to not do our own customization, because that's exactly something that will actually take us away from connecting to the global world. But I think I do understand the nuances that we have in our context. I mean, when I go outside of Pakistan and tell people that we're working in a country of 23% interest rate, for a second people get shocked, right? Like, because nobody understands how the hell is your private sector even functioning. So there are nuances here. And so I would love to understand from the panelists over here, what are those nuances that we have to tweak? What do we need to tweak in our country? Or in your context, in your business, to be able to access that capital or to be able to tap into those standards, right? What is that we need to sort of customize?
Just to add one thing, there are global standards and there are standards. There are 600 plus right now. Globally, there is a convergence activity going on right now that which standards they should be adopting, and Europe might be going with more IFRS driven, where the entire consortium or consolidation or merger happened for S1 and S2 already released, and they are coming up with more. But that's still not enough, because it's a financial materiality. It's not the impact materiality, which is the scientific base or the GRI side we can talk about. So there is a certain conversation which is happening. The important part, Pakistan should be a part of it. And luckily, there is a ESG task force where there is a different institutions as well as PSX and the regulators are sitting and they are trying to evaluate that which standard Pakistan should adopt. SACP has already released a ESG framework right now, that how the organization should start from a voluntary to mandatory adoption. There are 57 new regulation came in between 21 to 23 only, which became mandatory, and that has really impacted a lot of financial instrument around the world in terms of the evaluation side of it. So if we're looking at that, where we should be playing our role is just to get to agree to a one standard somewhere, so everybody can use that as a reference point and it become comparable globally. So I think that's one comment which I can make there. And Umar Sahib, you want to add something initially? Yes.
I just wanted to agree with what Tala is saying, and I think there are some very effective standards out there, and companies really need to start plugging into them. One of them being the Science-Based Targets Initiative, which a number of multinationals already operating in Pakistan are a part of, including ourselves, right? So we have committed to hold the global temperature at 1.5 degrees, and we've all our targets are agreed, and we are committed to the net zero. And because we are signatory to the SBTi, everyone takes our targets very seriously, right? And now saying what it means is by 2030, we need to hold our scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions to 50%. Now, it's easy to say 50%. I know that today technologies don't exist for our products to bring it down to 50%. Now, what this means is now that we put ourselves in the public domain, right, we need to now invest heavily in R&D to make sure we develop those technologies. Unfortunately, there's very few Pakistani companies I see on that list. There are about 3,700 companies which have agreed targets, of which 2,500 have committed to net zero. But when I go down the list, I don't see too many local Pakistani companies in there. And that's something I think we need to really all focus on. And I think Tala and his organization is playing a good role on that on the textile side. But there are a very large number of other companies which need to start looking at plugging into one of these initiatives.
No, very true. I think that's one thing which everybody should be start looking from a business perspective, how they want to go with that. And scientific-based target setting is a one of an initiative which can help most of the organization. Bonus, you want to add?
First of all, I want to respond to the bio opportunity solution also. So we actually were in talks, and we are still pursuing that we can actually generate at least 40 megawatts. It was a study done. There is a Canadian technology whereby the biomass, which is, as we speak, from the Landhi cattle area, it just goes into the sea. It can be used to generate power, and we have demonstrated that. There are some issues because of availability of land, and when we are trying to enter into a contract, they are putting up a pricing which is beyond reasonable level, and they're still throwing it into the sea, but when we are trying to buy it, there is a problem. But again, we are still pursuing it. So we obviously are aware of whatever we can do. We are talking to the local government. Someone can actually generate almost 200 megawatts of power from the waste which is in the city. And there are issues in terms of who owns the waste and how it can be collected. But again, there are discussions happening, and I can tell you that I don't think it can continue as it is right now. It is going to happen, inshallah, very soon. So, in terms of what we are doing, we have now our sustainability report available on our website and is available to the public. We are obviously trying to calculate the overall emissions that we release in 1 year and how we can reduce it, and with green buildings and obviously converting some of our vehicles to electric vehicles, so that that emissions also reduces. But at the end of the day, I want to again tell you that we also are putting up, inshallah, some indigenous fuel-based power. I don't want to take coal name because indigenous resources are now very limited. While we are doing hydel, but this is also something which we do, and you will read it in the newspaper. So today I'm talking about green, and tomorrow you will see an announcement that KE has signed something with someone for coal conversion. Let me tell you that in the initial years, probably it is going to happen, but this country is going to be there, inshallah, and we need to plan for a sustainable net zero, which probably will happen later part of, I would say, our, we don't know how much life anyone has, but, a bit later. But yes, there are plans, and right now the solution, unfortunately, rests with a utility like K Electric and again the country itself, to have some indigenous power generation, which predominantly is now limited to hydel and coal. There is no other resource. We can talk about the sea, which can be used, but I think we are far away from that. So the awareness is there, and inshallah, you will see it delivering those things.
I think there are two sides of the equation, by the way. There is a one, how we can reduce emission, and there is a second side of the equation, how we can improve the velocity of absorption as well. So basically, the Earth does not have an issue in terms of absorption. It's the velocity of emission versus the velocity of absorption. So there is the other side of the technology as well, like the carbon capture and storage and these kind of things which we can bring, and afforestation with the proper economic activity. So just last 30 seconds comment, and then we already got the red slip. So, sir, starting from you, 30 seconds, final comments.
Okay, so final comment is, I think we've talked a lot about the opportunities that exist. I think we have to look at our individual operations, our scope, and see, even in terms of post-process waste, what we can do with it. How can we encourage? We talked about biodiversity at Cura since 1995. One of our a key element in terms of waste generation in our largest business, which is our soda ash facility, is lime, which actually is filled in lime beds, and we've taken these lime beds post evaporation of water and converted them, 41 acres, into a green belt. Where we now have 86 species of birds, 4 species of reptiles, 12 species of butterflies, and has been recognized by WWF as a key intervention to promote biodiversity.
Thank you. Naz, what's your recommendation?
What I would just say is that I think the private sector is here to play a really important role. We know that Pakistan is very vulnerable to climate impact. And the estimates, as you know, as per the Climate Change and Development Report of the World Bank, is it's about $350 billion is what you require, right? Some in mitigation and some in decarbonization. And the amount of capital available generally is under 50 billion, if we see over the next 6-7 years. And none of this can be done without the active participation of the private sector.
And the mobilization of private capital as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's what we would like to see happen a lot more, which is why people here are really, really important. Thank you.
Monis, 30 seconds.
I think but the takeaway is that everyone is fully aware of their responsibility, and as a large corporate citizen, which is, by the way, is heavily regulated also. Our team is trying its best to do everything, including diversity, decarbonization. All the sustainability areas are looked very carefully, and in all these summits, we have said, and I'll again say it, "Vyavastha rahe, shajar se umeedin bahar rakh."
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Wanus. Umar sir.
So thank you. So I think one thing we need to all understand is that while we're looking at technological innovations for sustainability, that will happen. But what we also need to focus on is a profound shift in mindsets and habits. We waste a lot of resources. 1/3 of all the food produced for human consumption is wasted. It's $1 trillion worth. 30% of all the electricity is wasted. Almost 70% of the water extracted is wasted. So I think we as human beings also need to change our habits, and I call this, we need to move towards, and I'll say it in Urdu, ehsaas se bharpoor zindagi, mindful living. And that's really what I want to see as a mindset shift coming in all the 7 billion people who live on this earth, because like Farabia said, there is no planet B.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Umar sir.
I think just building on Umar Saab's comment around mindset shift, I think at a private sector level, we need a strong mindset shift to move away from a rent-seeking approach. We need to fundamentally invest in innovating, and we need to be able to comfortable making those investments for the long run as well. If we really want to pivot and go big and go scale. Don't think about small pieces. It's not going to work.
So scale is the key word.
Scale is key, yes.
Yeah. Amir sir.
I'll just make a general statement. I think just look at facts. Climate change has happened.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen, it has happened. Human nature is that we only react. We act when we're hit with something negative. That has already happened. Now it's time not to react, but act. And every partner in this whole equation has to act. Not just the private sector, the public sector, whatever constraints are, everybody understands. It doesn't matter, but we need to move. It has to be all stakeholders, private sector, public sector, financial institutions, your suppliers, your consumers. They need to also understand if they have to pay a little higher price for a product, there is a reason to it. And they're paying for their future. So that is something we need to work.
Now, thank you very much, and thank you very much. Thank you for being such a lovely audience, and I'm sure you will be interacting with everybody to catch up and get more from their side. Just on a closing side, you have seen the people who have made it happen. So that's what we call the art of possibility. And if you are the one who really believe that anything is possible, then it's our role to go out and make it happen. So it's everybody like sitting in a room, changing in their individual life, making the choices in a business which are more conscious. So that responsibility lies with us, and we can see the leaders here who have used the art of possibility in all that tough situation. They have made it happen. Why can't we go out and make it happen as well? Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you very much. And I'm noticing that Sajid Bhai is deliberately not making eye contact with me, even though he knew that I'm standing here the whole time. So this was absolutely brilliant. Thank you, Sajid Bhai, for brilliant moderation, for bringing up very, very important topics in very important areas. And for the sake of saving time, I'm not going to sort of go into any summarizing. So I would now request Asfar to please join the speakers on the stage so that we can start the souvenir presentation ceremony. I'd like to invite former Minister Syed Nasir Ali Shah Saab on the stage, please, for distributing the souvenirs. Assalamu alaikum. So we're going to be handing out to each of our speakers a personal copy of Dr. Ishrat Hussein's book, Development Pathways, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. Also for each speaker, there is a special fragrance package from Bonanza Satrangi Fragrances. So first of all, I'd like Bruno. Did we miss Bruno and not call him back on the stage? Sorry, Bruno. Right, Naz Khan, if you could please receive your souvenir from the Honorable Minister. And Syed Munis Abdullah Alvi Saab, your turn next. Asif Chuma Saab. So, Minister Saab, while I would request you to please keep standing on the stage with us, I'd like to invite Mr. Rizwan Diwan, Director Gatron Industries and Executive Director Novatex, to please present some more souvenirs. Rizwan Saab. Come on guys, we served you lunch. All right, Rizwan Saab, I'd like you to please present the souvenir to Umar Ehsan Khan Saib. Good, good. This side is doing much better. I need some more energy on this side of the hall. Okay. Amir Shehzad Saab. Thank you, Rizwan Saab. Please stay on the stage with us. I'd like to invite Mr. Rohil Mohammed, CEO Lucky Power. Please help us distribute the remaining souvenirs. उनको देना. Right, so Talha, if you could please receive your souvenir from Rohil Mohammed Sahib. And last but definitely not the least, Sajid Aslam Saab, हमारे घर के moderator. Now for the group photo.
आप शुरू करें if you want the papers हटा लूं और you will find it.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful, and we have a very, very lively discussion coming up. We've been talking about the big picture, but the question is, who sees that big picture most effectively? And that's the leader. The leader is the visionary. The leader is the one who sees the bigger frame, the bigger picture. And this upcoming discussion panel is with some of the most dynamic leaders that we have today. They've been game changers. The big picture became the intricate tapestry of human existence, weaving together the threads of history, culture, philosophy, and science. Today, this summit is geared to delve into multifaceted dimensions of the big picture on a big screen. If I could have everybody's attention. We have a very dynamic panel coming up. Thank you. This is where the leadership comes in. And our next panel is focused on the leadership in the big picture, in the special context of strategy and disruption. We have a brilliant team of game changers here. I would like to request Mr. Rizwan Diwan, Director Gatron Industries and Executive Director Novatex Limited, to join us on stage. Saira Awan Malik, President TCS Private Limited. Asif Peer, Chief Executive Officer, Systems Limited, Chief Executive Officer, Managing Director and Member of the Board of Systems Limited, and CEO for Tech Vista Systems in Dubai. Asif, we have you here. Sami Wahid, Managing Director, Mondelez Pakistan Limited. Sidra Iqbal, broadcast journalist and positive change activist. And Harun Qasim, Managing Director, Farm Evo and Shield Corporation. The session will be moderated by Ron Thomas, Managing Director, Strategy Focus Group, USA and UAE. Over to you, Ron. Thank you so much. If I could request the panel to please take their seats for us to begin our session.
Welcome, welcome everyone to our afternoon session. You know, a lot of the discussions that we've had over since this morning has been centered around strategy, has been centered around execution. Our panel is going to dive into a deeper aspect of that. And if you think in terms of marrying the two of leadership and strategy, and the key to that is execution. And a big part of that is about leadership. What type of leadership do we need in this age of disruption? Our global business landscape is continually being reshaped by unprecedented disruptions. Technological advances, global health crisis, disruption. Each factor fundamentally altered the way we perceive and approach leadership and strategy. And this is why it's important. Strategy is cool, but we need people to make sure that works. Understanding the diverse needs of a workforce, the DNA of a workforce is different. Customers are different. People are demanding more. But meanwhile, innovation, inclusive cultures, and all of these visions align to the ever-evolving global dynamics. So our topic is important. How do you marry those two? And whether you're a CEO, mid-level, starting out, how do you connect the two in your leadership, which could be from your team, or it could be from the C-suite? So we have scoured the globe for an exciting panel of experts, and we're going to talk through this exciting topic on leadership in the age of disruption. So we'll start it off by talking about the anchor on the first question, is leadership in times of uncertainty. And our first question is, what essential qualities and skills to lead uncertain and disruptive times, which is today? So we'll kind of go from here. Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Ron. Assalamu alaikum. I haven't been here in person, but some of the conversations, we've been able to catch them online. They've been absolutely insightful, and this is a forum people look forward to. So glad to be, part of a panel which is so astute, so insightful. To me, when it comes to being a leader in uncertain times, I think it's really changed the way leadership performs and the way we imagine leaders. I'd like to elaborate by saying that once upon a time, we used to look at a leader to be giving you that holistic vision that nobody else can look at. And it was primarily his or her job to translate what is so unfathomable, invisible, and actually break it down for people and empower and enable them. I think when it comes to uncertain times like today, especially when our businesses are being defined by this core word, disruption. Never before did we see it as a positive word before 2020s. We now see it as a welcome change. We'd like to know that our operations, our strategy, they can be implemented, and things which are merely thoughts and visions can become a reality much faster. So for a leader today, when they are operating in agile, disruptive times, it's really important that they're not know-it-alls. And I think what is primarily required of them is to be learn-it-alls. They have to go in with that open mind that I'm not the best in business. I mean, I've been in the television business for the last 15 years, and people far younger than me are way ahead in their digital game. So right now, if I go into creating something, some content online, I have to go with an open mind. I can't be sitting on my high pedestal saying, oh, I've done camera and I've known television forever. So I feel learn it all is the way to go forward.
I love that phrase, learn it all. I have to use that. So switching the mindset and learn from your people as opposed to going in the room and trying to be the only thought leader inside the room. Your thoughts?
Thank you, Ron. I think the very nature of disruptive environment means that leaders need to be very prepared to react to the unknown and never has been restored in this the disruptive times. I was, preparing for this session, and I came across research by Deloitte, which says about 23% of the employees believe their organization's leaders currently have the capabilities necessary to manage in a disrupted environment. So, here we have huge opportunity. And I think the quality that we need in this time of disruptive, and I think, we feel that this is disruptive environment. I think if you go 10 years before or 20 years before, my problem, like my father would have different, disruptive challenges. So we all believe that we are sitting in a disruptive environment, but I think every environment is disruptive. So I think the leaders should have the appetite to take the risk in any moment of in time you are. So if you are a change leader, and if you're not that don't have that appetite, then I think you don't become a leader. I think failing fast and learning quickly is today's mantra of leadership, I think. Otherwise, with the pace, the way things are going, it's really difficult to cope up. A second, I think, is leading and strategizing for disruptions needs strategic discipline. And I would quote here Ram Charan, the leading guru of the strategy. He says, leading through the inflation, and we all know today's times, how inflationary environment it is. So you cannot survive unless you are on top of on things in these difficult times. Last but not least, I think we have to encourage, as Sidra just mentioned, you need to open up to listen to the thing. And I think in organizations, we really need to have that, reduction of the power between and we need to have the listening mechanisms. Otherwise, as Sidra said, you know it all, then you can't be, survive as a leader in this disruptive environment. So here are my two thoughts.
Listening, how well are you listening? The other key component you mentioned is this is not your father's or your parents' workforce. The dynamics of the workforce is shifting, and it's a younger audience. The disruption for turnover is in that data set of the 20 to 30. So how are we going to lead going forward? So thank you so much for that.
Thank you for the question. And on a lighter note, you said this isn't your father's workforce. I happen to head a family business. And I just want to share my own perspective on leadership. I think anybody who's a leader, firstly and foremostly realizes that uncertainty prevails at all times. So really, if I were to think about the defining characteristics of a leader, particularly in times of disruption and uncertainty, I would say it is the ability to effectively manage all stakeholders. And in our case, the key stakeholders are our employees and our customers. And I just want to delve into both these segments a little bit further. As an established company operating in the logistics sector for the last 4 decades, we have seen new competition, new entrants coming into the market. And very often we see competitive rates being offered at lower prices, etc. And I think the key message in times of disruption and uncertainty to our customers is really to reassure them that we are their partners for the long run, because we have been with them through all their stages of growth. And so I think it's very important to convey that sense of confidence that we are not a fly-by-night operator, but we are a sustainable business that has been deeply invested in this market. Secondly, in terms of our employees, again, as an established business, which is a very responsible company, a key stakeholder, are our employees, and particularly in times of crisis and uncertainty, such as the times of COVID and the sort of inflationary pressures that we saw in the last sort of year or so, the employees tend to get very shaken. They don't know about the sustainability of certain businesses. A lot of competitors do in fact end up having to reduce their operations or fire large numbers of people. And so I think to again see how you operate in such times of crises really speaks a lot to your leadership. And I'm proud to say that during COVID, TCS did not fire a single employee. We stood by them. We made sure that people felt that reassurance. And even, thank you. And even lately, when we talk about minimum wage expectations, particularly in times of rising fuel prices, etc., we are 100% minimum wage compliant for all our permanent employees. And so I think, just to summarize, it is about how the leader can give confidence to the key stakeholders, recognizing the challenges, but also to exude that confidence about the path ahead.
Thank you for that. I thought of, when you talked about stakeholders, C-suite, we tend to think and focus on customers, and what you're saying, and this is the new dynamic, is customers and employees. Those are the new stakeholders, and we have to listen to both before we move forward or put policies together. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Ron, and thank you for your question. So the qualities that leaders should have in disrupting times. So there's this very interesting book by Jim Collins, Great by Choice, that I've recently read. And the book specifically covers the fact that they've done a research past 3 decades, American companies who have went through different disruptive eras. They looked into 20,400 companies, and they, after 9 years of research, they came down to 7 companies. And in those 7 companies were the companies whereby they performed 10 times better than their peer and competitive companies in the same industry. So organizations like Microsoft, Progressive Insurance, Southwest Railline, etc. And it covers different features about how organizations should manage whenever there are disruptive events. So from a leadership quality perspective, they pen down 3 important qualities that the leader should have. So one of the quality is that it's very important for a leader to have a productive paranoia. So productive paranoia is not about the leader to get scared, but it is about working out all the possibilities that could go wrong with the business in the times when there are uncertainties. To the point, Bill Gates did hung a picture of Henry Ford in his working area just for him to make him realize that even greater successes could be passed by, as General Motors did pass by Ford's success. So having a productive paranoia, working out the possibilities that could go wrong with the business and taking actions to reverse is very, very important. The second important quality that a leader should possess, it is about empirical creativity. And we do see that whenever there is a disruption, there are uncertainties, we do tend to follow what others are doing, right? So the recipe for one problem or for one industry that is followed by another could not be the same. So putting down the facts and figures, doing your analysis, and of course with the team, and coming out with a customized solution, it is very, very important for a leader to, as a quality to possess, to manage a successful organization. And the last one has been about phonetic discipline. So it is very, very important for a leader to be consistent with the values, for the leader to be consistent with the methods that they apply within the organization. So the three qualities that did inspire me, and I thought that I should share with you as an answer to your question.
No, that's cool. Evidence-based, the numbers show that. The numbers prove that if we operate in a certain principle or foundation, we could achieve success. So thank you so much for that. And by the way, Jim Collins is a great author.
Yeah, he is.
Big fan.
Yeah. So, leadership in these times not only survive, but thrive. So that's a leadership quality and something a leader needs to do. Learning, as we heard, is a key part of leadership, and attending a conference like this is one of those things. So I want to congratulate Asfar and the team, of the Nutshell team, to sort of arrange this galaxy of stars here on the stage and off. One other thing which I think a leader needs to have is communication. I think communication is very important to be able to communicate to the outside stakeholders as well as the inside stakeholders, right? One other thing is also decisiveness. So one has to, in times like these, prioritize speed over perfection. A leader needs to be comfortable that they don't know everything, right? Decision making can come anywhere on 30 to 70% of the information available. And 90% of the decisions are reversible. So it's not like a one-way street. If you make wrong decisions, you can always reverse them, because 90% of the decisions are reversible. Another thing is, the leader should learn to differentiate between complicated and complex problems, right? So a complicated problem can be broken down into many, many small problems and can be solved. But complex problems have many, many variables, some of them known, some of them unknown, and some of the unknown variables just might result in a very different or a very huge impact on the bottom line or on the company or whichever organization that you're leading. Other than that, I think if I were to sum up, leadership is like a compass, and strategy is like a map, right? So when you have a good blend of both of these two, you're bound to succeed in times like these.
Okay, cool. I wanted to touch on what you talked about, a learning mindset, and this is what I kind of picked up from that, is that one of the questions I will always ask, like, what are you reading? What are you reading besides work? And what books are you reading? What articles are you reading? How do you grow mentally, in this new space? Because Microsoft did an interesting study post-COVID, and they started this research as soon as they locked down. They kept researching people, surveying people, and two key points came out with that. For an organization as well as leadership, we need to listen more, and we need to communicate better. And I'll give you an example of that. I was on a flight coming from Dubai last night, and it was like an hour and a half late. Emirates never has that happen. And Emirates probably is the most perfect airline on the planet. And we didn't leave. And we were waiting. There was no air conditioning. And the pilot came on and says, this is an announcement. We have a problem. The engines won't start. We're trying to get the engine started. And everybody freaked out. And I'm thinking, bad communication. We have a technical issue, and we're working on it, and we'll be leaving shortly. So when we think about messaging inside of an organization, what message are we sending? You talked about your organization doing this, the structures that you've gone through, a challenge you've gone through, no layoffs, and you were able to do it in a humane way. All of that comes back to communication, so thank you for anchoring that point. So thank you. We always save the best for last, so let's go ahead and rock it.
You put me on a spot.
difficult after a lot of distinguished speakers. So first of all, good afternoon, everyone, and I think thank you, Asfer, for arranging this Future Summit. So I would say that in any time, doesn't matter, like it's a disruptive time, or leaders are those who make others better, right? So that's the philosophy that you always need to think about, that doesn't matter whether it's a accounts, you have to nowadays think about predictability